Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to Insight Series number 4 at We Are Wellbeing. Today we are joined by Lois Bean, who is our Associate Trainer in and Specialist in Resilience. If you want to follow this series, we have hashtag WAW Insights where you can follow us. And here is Lois and myself. So hello Lois, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi Sue, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you today.
Good stuff. Okay, so let's kickstart this webinar by talking about what is resilience. So the World Health Organization have a definition for it, and everyone has their own unique definitions of resilience, how they define it. But Lois, could you tell us a bit about what is resilience?
Yes, absolutely, Sue. I think it's really interesting that the WHO has decided this is a priority for this year. This was obviously decided even before the current coronavirus outbreak that we're seeing currently. And I think it just shows how important it is to work on our resilience, especially for our own well-being and our own health. To give you a definition, the World Health Organization says that resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, or even threats. It also includes coping with significant stress caused by problematic and toxic relationships in the family or at the workplace, and the capacity to bounce back from difficult experiences.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. Yeah, I know that a lot of people do define resilience as that capacity to bounce back, a bit like kind of rubber band and rubber band theory, that you've developed something and you can bounce back from trauma or things that happen in your life. So that's really interesting. So why is resilience important, Lois?
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned about the bounce back factor, because whenever I talk or teach about resilience, people often mention, it's that ability to bounce back, to be fine, to be okay when things might not go as you plan them to be. Now, that's not to say, being resilient won't make your problems go away, but it can give you the ability to see beyond them, to try to find some more enjoyment in your life and to manage stress and pressures better so that you can enjoy your life whilst going through adverse times. I liken it to something I call the umbrella effect. If the rain is the hard time that you're going through in your life, if you've got a good umbrella, it shields you from it. So, maybe your umbrella might keep falling over in the wind, or maybe you've got kind of little holes in it and bits of rain keep going through. You can work on making that umbrella tough and resistant. And I liken that to your resilience factor. It's going to shield you from more of those tough times that you go through in life.
Oh, that's a really nice analogy, as kind of that umbrella being that tool that you can get out of your toolbox once you've developed it to protect you at times of hardship and things. I like that. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Absolutely. And I think, building resilience can help you to cope better with conditions such as anxiety, depression. It can improve your mental health overall. If you maybe do have an existing mental health condition, then working on your resilience and building it can lessen the impact of mental health issues. And it can enable you to recognise better how you're feeling, any steps that you might need to take for help as a result.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to know that people have that within their grasp to be able to develop their resilience, particularly at times where they can feel quite out of control of their lives. It's nice to know that they have control over being able to build something such as resilience in the way that you've talked about.
Absolutely, and I'll touch on this a bit later on, but, very strongly believe you're not stuck with the resilience level you're born. Very strongly believe, and, studies would support, as would psychologists, that you can build resilience in your life. So that's something we'll look at a bit later on.
Lovely. Okay, so I know that over time and more recently, resilience has become quite a business buzzword. It's heard quite a lot in the corporate world. So could you tell us a bit about how the topic of resilience has evolved over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So the interest in what we would now call the topic of resilience really kind of started about 60, 70 years ago, after the Second World War. It's attributed to observing the behaviours and actions of young children in adverse circumstances. Obviously, that interest was initially in, these children. How are they coping? How is it that some children from the same families facing the same situations, some can go on and thrive in life and others don't? So that's really where this topic and this interest in resilience came from. Over time, though, that's grown. It's since been broadened to incorporate adults and elderly people. So over time, many studies have been conducted which discovered that resilient young people possess problem-solving skills, social competence, and a sense of purpose that enable them to cope with stressful situations. This research also showed that these capabilities in children and adolescents help them to rebound from setbacks. We've got that word again there, rebound, bounce back, thrive in the face of poor circumstances, avoid risk-taking behaviour. So sometimes it's about knowing what not to go anywhere near. That's a sign of resilience. And generally continuing to lead productive lives. It's probably just also worth pointing out that another discipline that played a very strong role in the early studies on resilience and its impact on health and well-being was the effects of trauma on people. So, maybe someone's listening to this today and thinking, you don't know what I've gone through in my life. I don't know how I could ever get through that. Well, actually, building your resilience could really help you as well. Studies showed that adult response to stress is very much influenced by the type of interaction individuals have with each other and the settings in which they live. It also depends on factors associated with the reliability of resources available to them. So when we say resources, we're not just talking about material wealth, but also a really key thing here is the support that you have emotionally. Do they have good relationships? Do they have good family relationships? What's there for them to be able to talk to someone if they need to? Do they have that kind of what we would call social infrastructure to support them in times of hardship?
That's really interesting. Thanks for that. I know that particularly the studies that have been done on the World War and, some of the things that people must have gone through in those times, it's interesting that when people seem to go through more trauma throughout their lives, they do develop that resilience. It seems that they have more reference points to be able to look back on and say, okay, so this happened and I responded this way and this was what was helpful. And they almost become more resilient the more things they go through. So it's really interesting to have that analogy that you've described of the impact of people that within the World War and how their resilience grew. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, Sue, and I'm really glad you pointed that out because here I think that's a really great thing to draw to the fore. People who have gone through a lot of hard times and adversities in their life do tend to, on the whole, come out stronger for it.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of building the resilience, other than, I guess, putting yourself through traumatic experiences to grow your resilience, what else can people do to build their resilience, Lois? Could you talk to us a bit about that?
Absolutely. I think this is incredibly prevalent with what the world's seeing at the moment. A lot of people are being faced with times of adversity and hardship. Maybe this is something completely new to you. It's the first kind of tough experience you've had in your life, or maybe as you could see the headlines growing, you thought, seems like it's going to be another tough period of my life coming ahead. I think it's very prevalent that we're discussing this today, and for me, and I think for anyone who is passionate about teaching about resilience, the great news is that many psychologists and experts who study the topic of resilience believe that it can be learned and it can be built. You are not stuck with the resilience levels that you have. You can build the skills, the knowledge and the tools to increase your resilience and manage your well-being. So just on a serious note, would like to draw out that being resilient doesn't mean that a person who doesn't experience extreme hard times. Obviously, we acknowledge that emotional pain and sadness are very common in people who have suffered trauma in their lives. And indeed, building resilience in such circumstances is likely to involve considerable emotional distress. But the good news is in building that resilience, you will be helping yourself in the long run and prepping yourself better for the things that life can throw at you.
Lovely.
Again, I can't emphasize enough that resilience isn't something that people either do or don't have. It means developing positive thought patterns, behaviours and actions that can be learned and developed in anyone. Just to take a minute, of course, at We Are Wellbeing, we offer a whole day's training on resilience and how to build it. If you or your company are interested in this, details for contacting us to arrange this will be given at the end of this talk. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you my top 4 areas for increasing your own personal resilience at this very stressful time. Just worth noting that these areas are recommended by academics who have researched this topic, psychologists who have studied it, and wellbeing experts who have lived it.
Okay, lovely. So do you want to talk about those 4 areas? Lois,
Absolutely. So my number one is consider what your priorities are and have self-confidence and belief in the decisions you make according to what is important to you in your life. A lot of studies have shown that this is really important, this element of almost self-belief, knowing what you want, knowing who you are, having a very clear sense of purpose based on your priorities, your values. Your strengths as a person is key to keeping your anxiety levels in check and maintaining a positive outlook. So I just encourage you, take some time, think about what's your purpose inside and outside of work. When you say no to one thing, what might you be saying yes to? What's most important to you? What are you good at? What are your strengths and talents? How can you use these more? And what changes might you need to make in order to focus your life around your priorities?
So it's really that kind of self-awareness, I guess, there that you're describing, really, around that and directing people's purpose.
Absolutely. I think when you start to build your life around things that you're confident in, it gives an overall increased sense of well-being. It causes you to feel that you can be effective when you're faced with challenging circumstances, and that increases your self-esteem. And this is inherent to feeling a resilient person.
Oh, lovely.
So shall I move on to my second goal?
Yes, please do, yeah.
Yeah, so another thing I think is really important is being flexible in your approach to life. So if you're someone like myself, I'll put my hands up. I'm very much a type A personality. I like my ducks in a row. I like to have my plan in place. I like to know when things are meant to happen. When you're faced with challenges, if you're that kind of a person, it can really kind of throw you out of kilter, really. So the challenge, for people such as myself, who when we're faced with challenges and the unexpected, try to think about, well, how do I approach them? Am I the kind of person who tenses up and do I think, oh, I can't do this? This wasn't part of the plan. I'm going to bury my head in the sand and pretend it's not happening, or I'm going to be, I'm going to be like a bit of steel that doesn't bend. Or can you try and be someone who flexes and you see it as a fun challenge to try and overcome, something to be solved? Trying to be flexible, rolling with the punches, not having this fixed, immovable view on how life should be, can really help to create resilience, as it means you can move and flex with the inevitable challenges that, let's face it, life can bring.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's kind of like evolution in some regards, isn't it? That ability to adapt to different circumstances is kind of what led to kind of survival of species and things like that. So it's really interesting that that's so closely correlated with resilience there, as you've described.
Absolutely.
Okay, so did you have another tip there as well?
Yeah, two more tips. So my third one is creating and maintaining meaningful connections. Now, I touched on this earlier in our webinar, but building good, lasting and supporting relationships with others, seeking their help and support when we need it, can help us to deal with and overcome challenging situations we may face in life when we're feeling like we're not on our own and having to cope on our own.
And that really links in with the picture there that you've got on the slide, that kind of group of young people kind of supporting each other, which I think is really nice, because the expression like no man is an island, it has been shown, the more empathetic we are with each other and the more social connections we have in either form do boost our resilience. So I think that's a really good tip that you've explained there.
Absolutely. I think some people might be listening to this and thinking, well, I don't really necessarily have a group of friends that I feel I can talk that openly to, or maybe you're in a situation, you've moved for work and you've moved away from your close friends. I'd really encourage you, obviously, when everything gets back to normal and we're not in lockdown anymore, think about your hobbies. What do you enjoy doing? And, how can you socialise these hobbies? Maybe it's playing sports, team sports. Maybe it's some kind of a faith activity. A lot of people are saying they're using this time in lockdown to assess their life. And, if you feel kind of when the going gets tough, you maybe don't have that support network you wish you had. This is, I think, a really good time to start making some changes and start building your life around what your priorities are that I spoke about earlier.
Yeah, that's really nice, and that links to one of our earlier webinars that we had with Dr. Emma Burgess, and she was saying the importance of being congruent to your values and your beliefs, and how important that is to your mental health. So again, it's really clear, that link between mental health and resilience is really clearly linked there with what you've described. So yeah, again, really interesting. Okay, was
Brilliant, thank you.
was that it on the tips, or was there one more? I think I've lost count. There's so many.
Yes, so my next tip correlates to our next slide.
Okay, lovely. Here we go. Kindness. So what can you tell us about kindness, Lois?
I think being kind is obviously something we generally think about when we're, thinking about others. Maybe you were brought up as, treat others as you'd like to be treated yourself. But I also think something that's really important is to treat ourselves how we treat others. When we're being nice to other people, how do we talk about ourselves? How do we think about ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Take a moment just to focus on your internal dialogue. Are you being kind to yourself and talking to yourself as you would the people you love when you make mistakes, or do you come down really hard on yourself? Everyone is in a stressful situation at the moment across the world, and obviously we're being told to be kind to other people, but I think, how can you be kind to yourself? Just take a moment. Maybe the next time you go through a stressful situation, or you maybe make a mistake, just take a moment or reflect afterwards. How did I talk to myself? What did I think and feel about myself? And I think a real key thing for resilience is accepting you will make mistakes as a person. Don't berate yourself for them, learn from them and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another key thing as well, obviously, is being kind to others. The shop worker who's turned up so that we can get our food shopping today, the cleaner in the hospital, doctors and nurses, but also people just trying to go about their daily business in what is currently a very hard climate. How can we think about being kinder to others in the current climate we're all living in?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice there, Lois. And I really think it is really interesting around, what would you say to yourself? Because sometimes we can be our own worst critic to do with things. And I know that often I sometimes think, what advice would I give someone else that was in this same situation as myself? Because we can be so much harder on ourselves than we can with other people, that actually you can see how being kind to yourself as well as others would actually boost your resilience, because you're not kind of chipping away at that shield that you're trying to develop for yourself. By berating yourself or saying this isn't good enough or things like that. So as you can see kind of the power of that kindness by doing that. So thank you for that. That's really interesting.
Absolutely. And I think if you are the kind of person who berates yourself in the context of resilience, if you get stuck on that one thing, you won't be able to progress forward. You will literally be hindering yourself. So, the benefit of letting go can really help your own personal resilience.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to summarise now what we've covered today. We're just allowing 20 minutes for these talks, so there's a lot to cover. And as Lois mentioned, this is a massive topic, and we do have a whole day's worth of material on training for this if you're interested to know more. So just looking at what we've covered today. So we've looked at what is resilience. So we looked at the World Health Organization for resilience, as well as defining it as a really nice analogy of that ability to bounce back and having that kind of umbrella and protective shield over yourself that Lois described. We talked about why resilience is important and how it gains reference points for us throughout our lives, so that we can grow from each and become more and more resilient with each hardship that we encounter. And it's also something that Lois talked about that we really have control over. So whilst a lot of things are out of our control, like certain stressful situations that we have to go through, resilience is something that we can harness within that situation to have control over it and build it to allow us to deal with that. So it really is within our gift, which is really, really good to know, particularly when you're really struggling. So we talked about some of our thoughts and tips that Lois had there on resilience. So hope that many of those really kind of help you, and you can start to use those tips to feel more resilience in yourself. We talked about building resilience, so how you can develop that as well. And also, last but not least, we talked about the power of being kind and how this can build your resilience, but also, support those around you, which is so important at this time. So thank you for listening today. Please do contact us with any questions or queries that you have around anything that's been covered. We have a hello@wearewellbeing.co.uk email address. So please do get in touch and follow the rest of our series that you can see within our website. So thank you very much to you, Lois, as well, for taking the time to talk to us today and talk about your experience and expertise in this area.
Thanks, Sue. It's been great being here. Thanks for having me.
Lovely. You're very welcome. Thank you.